Good afternoon. We are going to call the Hood River White Salmon Bridge Authority meeting to order on November 25th at 2:05 p.m. Let the record show that commissioners in Oregon, Fox, Babbitt, and Polson are present. Alternate Thomas, Edwards, and is Nate online? I don't see Nate. On the Washington side, Commissioners Anderson is present. It looks like Commissioner Keebler and Gibson are not online. We have alternates Berger present, and is Eric online?
We're just pulling them in.
Okay, and Commissioner Wilson, alternate Wilson is online, and Gilchrist is not, correct? Okay, so let the record show we do have a quorum. Are there any modifications to the agenda?
Sorry.
Would you like
something else?
Yeah.
To the minutes. We're not there yet. I apologize. I was way ahead.
All right, I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
So moved.
There a second? There is a second. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Corrections to the minutes.
Thank you, sir. I noticed that in the minutes, a lot of people in their attached to vote are by their last name and mine is by my first name. So I was just wondering if there's a standard, if we're just doing, there's a standard, but if there is, that's something I did notice.
We will have that amended.
It should always be last name.
Should be last name.
Signature.
Okay. There any other
It has a first name, so maybe that's the confusion.
changes to the minutes? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes as amended.
So moved. I will second that.
There's a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. I'm not hearing Mr. Wilson.
Sorry, I've got I've got dogs barking in the background intermittently. So
Okay. Just making sure you knew you were voting right now. All right, next we'll
Thank you.
move to public comment. Comments will be limited to 3 minutes per individual. Is there any public comment? I'm not seeing anyone from the public that names that I don't notice. Okay, we are going to close public comment and move into co-chair's report. Commissioner Fox.
Yeah, I just like very brief mention that over the next 2 months, it's going to be really critical that our whole teams are engaged in the OPC and the OPC review of its various components. There's a bunch of meetings coming up, and it's really important if you at all possible can participate in that. It can be critical going forward on this project. We all understand what's in it, what's not in it.
And I would just mention that we have in early December, there's a lot of things happening in a very quick period of time. We have the legislative days in Oregon. I'd like to thank Commissioner Folsom for stepping up. And we also have training here at the same time. It's 3 days. If anyone can attend either of those and make the time, that would go a long ways. But it's hard to be in 3 places at once right now. Okay, let's move on to the project director update.
All right, thank you. Just running through the report real quick. I'm gonna skip the GR because we got GR reports coming later on the funding and finance. We are currently working on under the 15 million is our funding source through the Washington Move Ahead funding. This upcoming year, we will have a $20 million lottery bond sale by Oregon that we're anticipating this spring, as well as a 30 million Washington commitment through Move Ahead again that will come into effect July, August timeframe of next year. And then we're heading into legislative sessions in the next couple months to request the additional state funding of 125 million from each state. So we'll continue to work that. The Hood River County loan is still in conversations. Hopefully we'll see that come to resolution. We needed to follow up Debbie, I don't know if you were gonna report later or have a report back on the discussion with OTIB.
I have requested information from OTIB, but I haven't heard back from them, so I will keep bugging them, about it.
All right, and then we're still working with FHWA on our infragrant agreement. Hopefully we'll see that coming through soon. And then we have our BIP application that is submitted and under review at this time. The Treaty Tribe MOAs, we're actually making some progress there. We have a draft agreement, or FHWA has a draft agreement proposal from this person that they're reviewing. So as soon as they're done with their review, they'll provide it over for us to review. We actually have a discussion later on in the meeting about a proposal for Umatilla that we want to go through and have a discussion on, and an action potentially from the board. And then we're continuing to work with Yakima Nation and Warm Springs on there. So 2 of the 4 are looking like they're getting closer to a proposal, so that's good. We're hoping to then see the other ones come online early next year. Right away and survey are currently on hold as we work through some comments from FHWA on our funding constraints on the project, as well as the Oregon STIP. We just had a conversation with them prior to this meeting. I think we have some direction on how to move the things forward. ODOT's going back, or FHWA is going back to review some information. We should hear from them either late this week or early next week with the holidays on resolving that, I hope, and then moving forward, which will allow our right-of-way functions to then move forward as well. The right-of-way for the Port of Hood River will be handled, just to remind everybody, by ODOT. We started that conversation, but we had to put that on hold pending this finance discussion. So once that gets resolved, then we'll revisit that conversation with ODOT to handle the right-of-way activities with the port.
It's kind of important to say that the importance of the STIP and getting that behind us is that that's a step that's needed to be able to access 75 million of the 200 million infra grant that we must have by early next year.
Correct. Permitting, again, they're still working through that. No real changes with the permitting. The FEIS and the record of decision. The reevaluation is moving forward. The section 106 is moving forward. Those are in their final reviews, and actually, I think we'll be ready for signatures by the end of this year, early next year. And then there's just a couple final steps for the ROD. We are working with FHWA and ODOT on some getting that resolved. Right now, the way Kiewit is approaching the project and the project team is approaching the project is we are designing the project, estimating, scheduling, budgeting the project based on the current constraints of the biological opinion, the NEPA documents as we have them. That's what's going to be carried into our risk workshop in January. And then in that risk workshop, we will identify risks to the projects, opportunities to the projects, and make some determinations on how we maybe move some of those things forward. But for right now, it's being designed under what we currently have committed and planned related to the NEPA. So, and I think it's very important for people to understand so that we can keep the project moving to establish a baseline for the project that then can be measured against as we move through design over the next 18 months.
Sir, so the pricing that we're gonna see at the OPIC meetings in December are the cost it will take to build a bridge under the current constrictions of the FEIS and the biological opinion,
That is
correct?
correct.
So anything after that would be potentially outside the box of what has already been approved by FHWA.
Correct.
So at this point, when we are priced, the decision of the ROD should then be, if we can
Based on
build a
that.
bridge, then we're not impacting hypothetically outside of the VA.
That is correct.
That's the price we're gonna hear in December.
Right. So there's probably opportunities to help cost and schedule if we get relief in certain areas, if it proves out to warrant it.
It's hard to build in the current constrictions, correct, of where everything is and the level of the ground. So you probably will think of new
I
ideas.
mean, that's our
The key thing, I mean, for everybody to understand full transparency, the major issue is on the Washington side. Getting access over onto the shore, but also out in the river because it's so shallow to be able to build the piers and so on there. So the price that we're getting right now is in conformance with the existing biological opinion, which is probably going to be pretty big. And there may be opportunities that we can do something there. It just kind of depends on the outcome of it. But that's a target area.
But that would cause potentially a change.
So before we get too much into the what if,
I clarify what we're gonna hear in
So,
December.
yeah.
So we're not hearing any fun ideas of outside the box thinking.
Yeah.
What we have is what can be built with the current environmental permitting documents that we have.
that is correct. We're
Right.
moving forward under the current information. In January 16th. I think has been confirmed now.
Workshop.
The workshop, we will have a risk workshop. That will be a public meeting. We'll notice it and everything. We will do a full risk workshop with, I'll say value engineering, true value engineering, not changing scope, just be clear. And we will look at that, and then out of that meeting, we will understand the risks, contingencies related to those risks, opportunities that we can pursue. And then the bridge authority will need to make a decision based on that meeting, how they want to move forward with those risks and those opportunities. And then we will have more information from Kiewit on things that they know, things that they don't know, what they need to investigate more. And there will need to be some decisions made on how to investigate those things. So just to make sure everybody's clear, we will get a baseline. That baseline, the baseline cost, everything is based on what we know today. We will talk about changes once we get presented some more detail on changes to the level that we can then have the detail to actually have the discussion and not what if.
So being at a public meeting, all of our team is invited
Yeah,
to this workshop. I would recommend to you, if you can spend the time, do it, because it'll give you a really good perspective of where we are, where we're heading, where are some opportunities and where are some
risks.
challenges and risks
Yep.
that we face.
It will be a very informative discussion.
We're planning on having federal highways and
We are doing it in partnership with HRWSBA so that we don't have to do two of them. We talked to them last week. We're gonna format it so that they get the data and the information that they need out of it, as well as us getting ours, so that we have one risk log for the project that serves everybody's purposes, and that we don't have different lists for different people. So
What's the date again?
January 16th. It's the
15 before.
13th. I'm sorry, 16th, the Thursday.
why don't somebody get us an invite
We'll get it out to everybody. Yeah.
so we can get it on the calendar?
Yeah, I think the whole been sent out. We'll make sure everybody has it after this meeting. So, sorry, any other questions?
The OPC is not a public meeting though, right? So the invitation for,
The briefings to the board, we will do board briefings in January out of the OPC. Those will be public meetings where we will brief the board on the OPC discussions. Because there is typically proprietary costing information in the OPCs, we're not making those public. But there will be a full briefing to the board on the outcomes of that.
So, executive summary.
And we'll have to talk to legal about how much of that can be under executive session because of some of the sensitivity around some of the information.
Are you going to explain what OPC is?
I'm sorry, opinion of probable cost, which is really just a cost estimate. So, sorry,
Okay, continue. Got anything?
that's it.
All right, any questions? Okay. Move on to engineering and construction.
Yeah, I would just mention that first off on December, what was it, 12th, 13th and 14th?
16, 17.
Okay, close. 16, 17 and 18. We're doing some internal reviews of the draft OPC. The 16th, if I remember right, is KMC's version of it, the independent cost estimate. The next day will be Kiewit only. And the third day will be the combined comparison. So the ENC meeting or ENC committee is being invited that, and I believe budget and finance.
Yeah, and the reason for the separate stuff is to provide that independence. That's the whole reason of having an independent cost estimator. They'll do theirs independently. They have had discussions around quantities and approach so that there's a clear understanding. So the scope is understood. I'll say more scope clarification to make sure everybody's bidding and pricing the same scope. And then they'll independently price it. We'll review it independently, and then there'll be a kind of a, not really, I want to call it a negotiations, but a reconciliation of differences as that joint. And that'll be what will move forward. And that will be also what's used to go into the risk workshop as the base cost in the risk workshop.
Okay, on the engineering and construction committee report out, we've got notes on all this, but it was a pretty, go ahead.
Sorry, we skipped government relations partner.
Oh, okay.
Sorry. Do you want to go back to the government?
We can go there next. I'm looking at, they're different.
Oh, are they?
Yeah.
Oh, we're up here on this one.
All right. Sure. Let's go back to government relations.
Great, we'll kick things off here. Scoot into camera range. Chairs, board members, thanks for having me. For the record, my name is Dan Marr. I am a subcontractor on the project through HNTB, handle government relations strategy. I'm going to give a very quick kind of higher level government relations update. And then we've got all three of our lobbying partners here on the Zoom who are going to give us more detailed updates. Of course, the elections have passed since the last time we all met. We know who's going to be representing us in these next couple of years. And so we are focused on a few priorities as we approach the new year. At the federal level, our top priority is getting the project's infra agreement in place so that we have the $75 million for design that we can be using to keep the project moving. Next up at the federal level is advocating support for our bridge investment program application. With the change of presidential administration, we're unsure whether awards will get made before that changeover or after, but we are preparing for either scenario. In both states, we're getting ready for legislative session, which begins in January. And of course, our ask there is to round out our goal of 125 million total from each state. Between now and then, we're working with our lobbyists to meet with newly elected folks and anybody else who needs a refresher on our project between here and January. In both states, the legislative picture as it relates to transportation funding is starting to come into focus, and we'll hear from Thorn Run and Boswell in just a little bit with more detail. So I'm going to hand it over to our lobbying partners. We'll start with Summit and then hear from Thorn Run and finally Boswell. So Summit folks, you want to take it away?
Great, thanks, Dan. Jim Kolb with Summit Strategies, do the federal work here for the authority. As Dan said, obviously a lot of change coming in Washington, and also a lot of speculation as to what that change means. I think everybody just needs to take a beat. It's, no one really knows. A lot of the plans haven't been spelled out. President Trump and now President-elect Trump has, named, former Congressman Sean Duffy as his Secretary of Transportation. He doesn't have a big transportation track record, so a lot remains to be seen as he fills out the rest of that team. As Dan said, our primary focus has really been on trying to make sure that we can lock down the project agreement for the $75 million. We've been talking to senior leadership at USDOT. We've put a full court press on with the delegation on both sides of the river to get them to touch base with DOT and federal highways, and see if we can try to get some senators and members to potentially call down there and urge the department to prioritize finalizing this project agreement prior to the end of the Biden-Harris administration. As I said, we had some conversations, and they're very focused on prioritizing, doing additional grant announcements. I'll come back to the BIP piece as well. Finalizing project agreements, and obviously getting projects obligated. So we're trying to make sure that as they're prioritizing project agreements, we're one of the ones that can get done. Obviously, they're clearly trying to lock down as much of these funds as possible under the infrastructure bill. Also pushing hard that, it's not completely clear at this point as they try to push out additional grant announcements where they are with BIP, given kind of the unique nature of the way they've done the rolling application process. But, we, as Dan mentioned, we've been putting a full court press on with the delegation. We've, got letters of support now from Senator Murray. Just got one that came in literally while we're on this call from Senator Cantwell. And then we have one from the Oregon delegation as well. So everybody's, engaged on that process. And we know Cantwell staff was also gonna, in addition to talking about the project agreement, was gonna also talk about the BIP piece as well. So we're doing everything we can to keep our the delegation engaged on our behalf, so that this project remains near the top of the priority list as this administration tries to ensure that they can get as much of this funding committed as possible before the administration ends on the 20th. So that's been our priority here over the last month or so, but happy to answer any questions.
Arthur Babbitt's here. About 2 weeks ago, I spoke with Sarah Schmidt, field rep in Merkley's office, and she was telling me that she was working hard to get a whole bunch of agreements signed, and that was the major push that they were doing in the office. I described what we were looking for, and she seemed at that time to be not aware of the details. So I want to make sure, has that connection been made since?
Thanks, Arthur. This is Jake Okenberg with Summit. I've spoken with Sarah 3 times, as well as their head of appropriations, Meredith Booker, twice. Not only has that connection been made, they've reached out directly to the Secretary of Transportation's office, noting that our project agreement has not yet been approved, and pushing them to get that done.
And especially the separation of the design dollars from the construction dollars. I'm presuming that they appreciate the importance of that.
They also appreciate the importance that the congressionally directed spending, the $8 million, $4 million on each side of the river, is also connected to the project agreement. So there's several things that they're very interested in seeing moving across the line ASAP.
Great. And then, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, and so a couple of days ago, I spoke with Wyden's state coordinator. I can't recall her name, but
Lisa Rockhauer, maybe.
Lisa, yeah, I think that's who it was. And she did not seem aware of this particular project. But is Wyden's office also working on this, or are we concentrating on doing this through Merkley's office?
So, Arthur, as you're probably finding out, depending on who you talk to on what day, they may not be aware of what the 50 people in each of their offices are working on, not surprisingly. But not only is Senator Wyden's office aware of it, they were signed on earlier this month to a great support letter that Senator Merkley, Senator Wyden, and Earl Blumenauer sent directly to the Secretary of Transportation's office. I also just spoke with the point person for Senator Wyden's transportation and infrastructure, that's Sidney Beasley, who you may recall we met with in DC just on Thursday about this, and they're reaching out to the Secretary's office as well.
This is all great. And so a couple of weeks ago, we got an email encouraging us to speak with whatever reps and whatever offices we can to encourage this to happen. And so I'm feeling like there's a little bit of tangling of wires and stuff. Is it helpful for us? I made these contacts. I was in an environment where it's easy to make the contact. So I spoke with these people. Is it helpful? Does it harm things, or is it just kind of neutral? Should I be doing what I'm doing or not?
Yeah, Jake, you can go ahead. I mean, I think any of these contacts I think are helpful to keep it at top of mind. I mean, especially for the senators, they've got a lot of projects and things that other folks are touching base with them on. So I think the more they hear about this project, I think it's certainly helpful.
Yeah, I'm not sure what email you're referencing, Arthur. I don't think it came from us, but certainly,
No.
and any contacts that you have and connections you have with the congressional delegation, keeping this project front of mind is music to our ears, just as you've done so and always do. I appreciate just looping back and letting us know. That way, when I'm next running into Lisa Rockhour, or I'm running into Bree, or I'm talking to Sydney, we can all make sure it looks like we're on the same page and that we know who's reaching out to whom. But I say the more the merrier.
Great. No, that's helpful. I need clear instructions on that, and that's those are good. Thank you.
Any more federal questions before we move on to Thorn Run? Great. Dan, you want to take it away?
Great, yep. Good afternoon. Just a quick updates on our end. As you all know, we've had an election, and for the purposes that matter to you, there's been some changes. Your delegation in Oregon remains the same, although Representative Helfrich has resigned from Minority Leader and is now a member of the Republican caucus. Senator Bonham also remains, and he will continue to be a Minority Leader in the Senate. For a brief moment, you had both leaders. And then from an elections perspective, there was very little that changed in the overall picture of the legislature. Notably, the Senate picked up one additional vote by the Democrats, which we'll get to in a second, gives them 18. And that's often called a tax raising majority, because one party, if they have 18, can raise taxes without the other party having to vote for it. In the House, we're actually still waiting. There is a very close race in Woodburn. As of Friday afternoon, there was about 119 votes difference. Just 3 days prior to that, it was a 1 vote difference. If the prevailing outcome, or if the outcome presently available prevails, that would also actually give the Democrats 36 seats. So that would be a pickup for them, which would give them the revenue raising increase. I don't suspect actually fundamentally that will change the pathway on the transportation bill. My sense is that the Democrats, even with those majorities, will still try to pass with bipartisan support a transportation package. But that's the state of play on the elections. There are some other leadership changes. Some of you were involved in a meeting recently with the Senate Majority Leader, Kathleen Taylor. There is a new Majority Leader, Casey Jama from East Portland, who will join the leadership team. By and large, all of the folks that need to be briefed have been briefed, continue to be briefed. We are staying in regular contact with them. We will need to sit down in the coming weeks with Senator Jama, his likely incoming policy staff, assuming that he keeps the Democratic caucus staff, which I think he will keep. A lot of them have been briefed, but we'll need to brief him formally. He hasn't been as engaged in transportation policy previously, and so we'll need to spend a little bit of time with him. But by and large, all the other leadership, as well as the co-chairs of Ways and Means, are very familiar with the project. As you know, the Transportation Committee is also very familiar with the project. Each of them, they have, as you know, and you all participated in some of their statewide tour. They then broke into 3 different, what they're calling work groups, and essentially populated those work groups with representatives from the county and the city associations, and then other stakeholders that are by and large issue groups or different types of advocates. Those 3 groups are around essentially operations and maintenance is one of the groups. Another group is around transit and public transit. And then a final group is around the 2017 projects that, as you know, has been a theme of the committee, which is making sure that they are finishing those projects that were originally authorized or funded or prioritized, depending on who you talk to, in House Bill 2017 several years ago. That is, you'll recall we have had a refrain and understand that there are three main projects that ODOT wants to fund that have significant gaps in them. That's the Abernathy Bridge, then a 205 widening, and then the Rose Quarter project. There are a number of other projects. Many of you have been in the room with Chair McLean when she has mentioned that she sees by and large the our project and then the Newburgh Dundee projects as the other two projects that likely need to get funded in this bill. There are other projects. The city of Salem, for example, has one of their members at, via the League of Cities is sitting on the 2070 committee and had a conversation, which is chaired by Representative Evans, who represents the area around a project in Salem. There are a number of other projects, but by and large, the arc remains the same in terms of where we're going and how we get there. These committees, it is unclear or these subcommittees, work groups, it's unclear exactly what product they will be producing. They are ostensibly designed to help inform the building of the package, but there isn't really a landing place on that. Maddie Doe on our team actually right now is meeting with the staff that's been hired by the Transportation Committee to understand their most recent thinking on this. The other important piece is the committees have not been released for the new legislature. Those probably won't be released until the end of December, early January, at which point we will need to make some changes in terms of who receives some attention based on what I expect will be some shifts in the Transportation Committee, but I expect it will be robustly the same. There's some movement from the House to the Senate. We have two pieces of legislation that will be introduced for the project. One is essentially what we would call a placeholder bill for funding. If for whatever reason the transportation package moves and it does not include our project or similar projects, or doesn't move at all because the politics don't come together, we need to make sure that we have a vehicle for funding in that event that is separate. So that will be introduced and will essentially be held in abeyance until it's needed. And then there's another bill that you are familiar with related to ensuring that the authority can be included in Oregon Tort Claim Act relief. And that's a piece of legislation that will be submitted, for which the authority is the primary mover on, and we are keeping that bill in the works and getting it introduced and funded. The other piece, and I'll pause and answer any questions. Two things. There's going to be very little development on process until there's a new committee and the legislature gets the new committee is named, legislature gets underway. And so most of our work is focused on the new leaders. If there are people that are champions, continuing to keep them up to speed. Until you all have some new costing material that I know you're working on, we probably won't redevelop new collateral to hand to people until we have a little bit more certainty what that looks like. And then we'll be able to go sort of full throttle with new material. The ask remains the same in Oregon, which allows us to continue to do the work that we have, which is to finish off the work. That funding bill that I mentioned calls for 75 million in the first iteration, and then 30 following that. And I know that that's more of we'll have to wait and see where you all land, but that's the total amount, as well as 105 commitment on top of what they've already done. Finally, there was an economic forecast in Oregon that you may have seen the news around that was actually very positive, and positive in terms of new revenue. But if you read the tea leaves or get close to it, it's not really new revenue. There's a new formula that was used by a new state economist. As you'll recall, Oregon has had several significant, massive kickers in which dollars are returned back to the taxpayers because the forecast ends up being significantly off of what revenues actually are. The new state economist is using a far less conservative modeling of revenue, which shows far more revenue. I expect that will produce some additional early spending, particularly on what's called the rebalance in Oregon, where they rebalance the previous biennium's dollars, particularly in the social services space and some other places. It also makes it more likely that they are to have budget shortfalls if they get the forecast wrong. And so there's a change in forecasting that has produced what will look like more revenue. I think that probably ultimately does help on the transportation package. I think while it produces more uncertainty in the overall budget picture, it will probably embolden folks on a transportation investment package if they can find the politics to get there. So with that, I'll pause. Happy to answer any questions.
Arthur Babbitts again. So there was that memo that I forwarded to you that had been sent out to the committee number 3, which was indicating that there was a cut line drawn and our project was the first project not above the cut line. Is there any importance to that? What should I read into that?
Yeah, I don't think it was a cut line in the sense of a cut line about where the prioritization is. I think it was a cut line on what they were going to talk about in the next meeting. And so they decided they wanted to focus on those 3 projects. And then Dundee, you'll recall we've had, in all frankness, we've had more airtime with the committee and stakeholders than virtually any other project, maybe besides Abernathy. And so they were going to dominate their conversation there. As I mentioned, there's a city of Salem person on there, and Paul Evans is chairing that subgroup. And so they added the Salem project into that mix. And so they got to 5, and they hadn't really talked about Dundee. And as I mentioned, Dundee will probably be important politically for them. So my sense, Commissioner, was that was a line drawn around what their next agenda was going to be. We're making sure that's the case. It is, and we'll continue to do that work. I mean, they are theoretically looking at readiness on projects with a matrix around various criteria. I have seen no matrix talked about so far that we wouldn't score very well on. So I'm not concerned about how we do that. Politics are politics, so we'll have to continue to work with that. But I found that as far more situational than some kind of outline that people were contemplating in terms of funding.
Thanks. And so related to that, so I just got back from the Association of Oregon Counties annual meeting, and there was I was going to say undercurrent, but it was actually kind of an overcurrent of hostility to the transportation package based on some very bold statements about the horrible inefficiencies of ODOT. Why are we putting money into transportation when ODOT doesn't spend money well? How do you read this? What do you think about that?
So I think the politics get worse before they get better. And so as more and more focus has been on backfilling the funding for ODOT, more pressure has been on the question of whether or not you like ODOT. And so that response is going to start getting a lot more airtime as it feels like the giant sucking sound, as it were. And people start realizing that other things that they would like funded in transportation package probably are excluded by that. So I do think it's going to be rough. And I think those politics probably get a little bit more stiff. And one of the things that we have to worry about a little bit, particularly with this forecast, is if there aren't the politics to do revenue raisers and they're looking at 7 or 8 different ones to try and cobble it together, the way that they would solve an ODOT problem is by simply shifting funds over and solving it through new revenue that they picked up in a forecast or something like that, and not fully funding. So there's these are dangerous waters with regard to ODOT in terms of it's the level of prioritization given to it. And given the feedback people may have, but you will see, I think, Commissioner, even more consternation that other things aren't getting funded as such a big funding hole is filled at ODOT and the big projects.
And so when I'm talking to these commissioners, when I'm talking to other folks who have some role in the policy discussion, any advice? Stay away from it.
Well, I mean, you're in an interesting position. When we met with the Association of Counties on the project behalf, they weren't as interested in endorsing particular projects, which I understand, but did at the time seem like their priority was operations and maintenance, making sure 50-30-20 was protected. And at that time, Commissioner, I hadn't heard the sort of the anti-ODOT that you have heard recently, but it doesn't surprise me. So I mean, I think we need to, I would continue to stay positive in those, about the need for a transportation package. Some of that if you don't take care of this, we can't get to some of the other pieces that are really important. I do think it's the politics. I have always believed the politics on this probably have to open up to allow some other projects to be funded. Otherwise, you're not going to get the votes. So I think it is a balance between encouraging folks to be as supportive as they can, as well as being advocates for within their own delegation for what they need funded. So I mean, I would stay positive. I don't get the sense that your fellow commissioners want to endorse projects. So I don't think you necessarily need to go that direction. But I think a package is important. We have to find pathways if there isn't a package. But it is a lot harder without one.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions?
Yeah, a quick one. Do you mind overlaying the kind of the timelines for what you're expecting for what a transportation package might look like, or what the sort of the alternate pathways, like when in 2025 should we expect to see movement on some of this?
So you will see a conversation around the transportation package occur the entire session, I believe. So out of the gate, they'll be talking about it. That package and the politics around it start really probably getting put together. Well, let me put it this way, it probably doesn't pass until May, June, if it passes. And there will be several iterations of trying to put it together where people try and get the politics ready to go. They think they have it, and then it falls apart and they have to rebuild it. And so I think we'll go through several iterations of that. It won't surprise me if the package, if it passes in the last week of June. If that's when the session will end, and something like this where there's a lot riding on it politically, they may well hold it until the end to make sure that other things that need to happen in the session happen. But I think there will be an eagerness around that. So I expect, late Q2 being sort of where you're going to see that likely happen. That is even more so on a separate pathway. If there is a separate pathway, it will be through end of session funding, either through lottery bond or some other, funding in what's often called this Christmas tree. Those are not put together till beginning of June and really don't pass until the very last week of session. So I would expect final activity on those late. The transportation package, there'll be a lot more activity trying to build it throughout the session than you will see on an end of session package around other funding.
Okay,
Thank you.
positive news. Let's go to Washington. Mr. Boswell.
Thanks, everyone. Great to be here once again. I'll start with on the election side. In Washington State, we're gonna have a new governor. Bob Ferguson is the governor-elect in Washington State. I don't think there's any real great surprise. He is currently in the process of filling out his cabinet. There's gonna be a lot of changes, including at the head of transportation. So we should be getting word sometime in the next 2 to 3 weeks as far as, who may be filling that spot from Roger Millar. On the legislative side, the Democrats picked up 1 seat in the House and 1 seat in the Senate. They did not, neither side achieved the supermajority status, which, Dan kind of alluded to the Oregon version, which when you hit a supermajority, it means you have enough votes to do bond obligation votes without the minority party. They did not get to that point. They're 1 vote short. Senator King did win his election, the 14th district. Obviously, he has been one of the biggest supporters of this project, and that will continue. He will also, it hasn't been named yet, but he will also be the ranking minority on the transportation committee. We've been working, doing a lot of the kind of behind the scenes work with legislative and governors and transportation staff, kind of getting in the weeds as far as both our timing and phasing for funding. We're going to start with, there are some newly elected legislators in now the 17th and the 14th legislative districts. We're going to be doing the outreach to them between now and session. All of that's going to be occurring. There is broadly growing conversations around some sort of a transportation package. And again, I want to make clear to folks, our ability to get from that 75 to 125 million is linked to that broader transportation package. If a transportation package comes together, we have we'll be doing everything we can to be a part of it. If there isn't a broader transportation package coming together, then we're going to be doing everything we can to fight to hold on to the 75 million we already have. I am seeing more and more kind of interest and effort being put forward towards a bigger transportation package. There are, well, just like us, all the transportation projects out there are currently facing both funding shortfalls and cost increases that the legislature is going to have to navigate. One of the kind of, I guess, challenges that we will be facing, and Oregon I think is facing the same thing, and that's, we also have a significant general fund shortfall that is going to have to be navigated. One of the things that's being currently talked about, and there'll be more and more public discussion around this, is a general tax increase, specifically around payroll taxes and high earner payroll taxes. If something like that comes together, there is at least some acknowledgement that a portion of that in some way, shape, or form is going to have to go towards transportation. All of these are variables that are going to be, incorporated in as we navigate the legislative session. We still are, one of, obviously, Senator King's major priorities. And I think that we have positioned ourselves certainly as a project, at least from the Washington side, that needs to be prioritized. And we're going to continue to work on that. Currently targeting the same time we were going to do the Gorgeous Nights event, even though that's been canceled. Still want to have some of you folks up in Olympia to do a round of in-person meetings during that stretch. And I believe that's the back half of February. Right now, I don't have that date directly in front of me, but again, all of these things are going to be issues that we're going to have to navigate and focus on, but we are continuing to move forward, and our goal continues to be to get to that 125 from Washington State. I'm happy to answer any questions that folks have.
This is Mike Fox, not necessarily for you, Brad, but for others. We spent some time in the last couple of weeks informing some of our congressional folks about what happened with the cost increase. Has anybody gone to Senator King? Has he been briefed?
Yes,
Unless you
yes,
back-
Brad's been,
Yeah,
yeah, Brad
okay,
was in touch with it.
yeah.
Before
And
and after.
we did have, that was part of the discussion that we had with legislative and agency staff at the meeting
Okay.
a few weeks ago.
Brad, just for my literacy of Washington politics, 17th and 14th, where are those located? You said there were new
You are
legislators
currently
there.
sitting, well, and remember, this is, I'm not going to belabor the point, but the bridge project shifted legislative districts in the kind of reordering from the court case. So the 17th district is where the bridge is currently located on the Washington side. We were in the 14th legislative district, but both of those two districts are central to the bridge. So the 17th kind of goes up and towards Vancouver, but still encompasses that White Salmon area. And then the 14th district goes up north into kind of Yakima and all of that area. But we consider, as far as I'm concerned, those two legislative districts are our home districts, both of them.
And remind me of the names.
So the names of the legislators.
Yes, please.
Okay, on the Senate side, it's Senator Curtis King remains in the 14th legislative district. And then Senator Paul Harris won his election in the 17th legislative district.
Okay. And Harris, he was at the meeting we had with at Hewitt's office, wasn't he?
Yes.
That's
Yes,
what I thought I talked
he
to, and he stated that he's strongly supported the project. So
yeah,
we'll continue there.
we are not going to lack for support. It's more a function of trying to make sure that we're prioritized high enough and that that something comes together as far as a broader revenue package, however that looks. And
Thank you.
The unfortunate reality is those conversations tend to be bigger than any one project. So we'll be subject to the kind of the whims of a bigger series of events.
Thanks.
Any other questions? I just would mention it's amazing to see that Oregon has such a positive outlook in terms of revenues, where in Washington we're talking $10 to $12 billion shortfall over 4 years. So surprising to see how that's different between the two states. Okay, partner updates, Federal Highways, ODOT, WashDOT. Is there anybody online who'd like to give us any update or say hello?
This is Monica Pavlik, and I don't have any updates for you.
Monica?
And I think Marty sent you some information on the cost and schedule risk assessment. So I don't know if you had a chance to look at that or if you had any questions.
We have not had a chance to review it yet. Thank you though, Monica.
Okay.
Okay, open action items? None? All right, moving on to the consent agenda. We have a whole bunch of bills to pay. Everybody's had a chance to review it. I would entertain a motion.
Move to approve all of the items under consent agenda, including all of the invoices.
Second. There's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Okay, back down to the engineering construction. Do you have anything else?
Yeah, just real quick, we had a pretty extensive meeting last week. There was two of us. Catherine was out on travel, business travel, so didn't make this particular meeting, but Eric was there. And Eric, if I missed something, please jump in. We spent quite a bit of time on the OPC process as far as updating and reviewing the opinion of probable cost. We went through the schedule in quite some detail. We went, as we've just approved, we went through the contract time extension on Kiewit, the Kiewit invoice, the HNTB invoice. And we got into HNTB Amendment 5, and we started looking at it. And there was a couple of observations we made.
The newest invoice amendment.
I'm sorry?
The newest amendment.
Yes,
It's 8, just in case
Oh,
somebody's
okay.
referencing, sorry.
okay. The new amendment, we've now handed that particular package out to members of the committee, and we're going through individual reviews. And I think all of the committees are doing that as well. And we owe information back to you. I think it's,
As soon as possible.
Thanksgiving Day.
we had a good talk with Jason, and I forget his last name, on risk and
Keswick.
contingency.
Yes. Keswick, he's on, yeah.
Okay, and we came up with kind of a way to explain contingency. We're looking at maybe 2 pots, maybe even 3. And it kind of depends on what perspective you're looking at for contingency. So there would be 1 pot for construction, 1 pot for HNTB as our management contractor, and then 1 pot probably just for the authority. So that's getting kind of defined into some kind of a training program as we go forward here, I guess, as part of the risk work.
Really part of the risk workshop.
Okay. We looked at some treaty MOA language that we wanted to consider. We came up with an idea. We basically got shut down this morning as far as using it with federal highways and ODOT. So we'll put that on the back burner. And that related to how do you bring forward issues associated with the TFAS site, being able to access it and possibly building something off of that. We'll do that later on. We went through the financial reports of both Kiewit as well as HNTB. Made a few observations, but in general went well. And that's kind of the high points. Eric, do you have anything else that you want to mention?
I was just going through my list and I think you got everything.
Okay.
Question concerning the contingency discussion that you had. When we were discussing the BIP, the original proposal had a very thin contingency, and we as a group discussed it and said we don't want to play the game at this stage of pretending that we know more than we do, so we want to keep an appropriate contingency.
Yep.
How does that play into this discussion?
It plays into very, very nicely. But the concept that we're kicking around is that if you think about contingency or deviations within scope,
right?
Okay, the definition of in scope changes depending on who you're talking to. Right? So in scope, from a contractor point of view, is very specific. In scope from an HNT point of view is a little broader. And from our point of view as an authority, you know, I'm going to use an example. Out in Doha, we were building an airport, the Doha International Airport, and the main terminal is a $15 billion project. The main terminal, we had the foundations in, the steel was up, the roof was on, the emir flies in and says, I've got a problem with this terminal. What's your problem? I want it thicker. What do you mean thicker? I want it wider. Well, if we have to, and how much? Well, 30 feet on either side of center line. Said, well, we could do that, but you realize steel's up. We're going to have to take all of that down. We're going to have to take the roof off. We're going to have to change the foundations. We're going to have to redesign, put it back up. The contractor's probably going to want some money for that. And the emir said, no, 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 no. What do you mean? No, 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 no. I contracted with that contractor to give me one terminal. It's still one terminal. Okay, so when you're thinking about it from the authority point of view, our customer is the government that's giving us grants. They're looking at it as one bridge. They've given us money for one bridge. Trying to define a scope change to that, to them, is going to be very difficult for us to do once we're fully funded. So changes within that parameter we're gonna have to eat out of our contingency or contingency down through the line. So that's something we got to think about as we're defining our levels of contingency coming out of the OPC.
I think though, I'm trying to understand your analogy, and I have trouble imagining we'll have something as bold-faced as that, but I can certainly imagine that given our level of experience in building bridges, that there may be something that kind of sounds like that, that where we say, no, of course we meant this, and they'll say, well, that's not what it said. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, so it's kind of in the eye of the beholder, looking inward. When we say a bridge, what does that mean? And then when you're HNTB to the contractor, a bridge means this. And from the contractor in, a bridge means this. And it's a little bit different depending on what your perspective is,
Right.
or could be as far as a change. And all I'm saying is, as we go through a risk and a contingency analysis, we got to be thinking that way.
But you're talking about that the cost, the probable cost estimate is going to have a bucket for each of those three kinds of contingencies.
I believe we should.
Okay, thanks.
And we need to be involved in how much we set in each of those pods.
Any other questions? All right, moving on. Communications, government relations. Marla's not around. Who's taking that on?
Anna, do you have anything on that?
Yeah, hi everyone, Anna Mara, JLA. Yeah, I just wanted to share some things we spoke about at our last GR and comms committee meeting. And so we discussed the state of project financing and the future of the project. And we're developing a communications plan that can keep the public informed, during any of the funding scenarios that we may face in the coming months. And basically we agreed that even when, we're unsure of things, it is our responsibility to bridge users to keep them informed on what we do know. And part of this will be to develop messaging around where we may be uncertain, including when we might be able to access committed funds and how that may impact the project timeline. And so we also are going to emphasize the fact that the GR team is working closely with both project supporters and lawmakers to continue to secure that needed funding. And even though the price did go up a lot, the fact that this project is really essential to this community didn't change, and we're going to keep sharing with the public that the authority is really committed to delivering this new bridge. And so in the next couple of weeks, we'll be working on a communications plan that outlines messaging for the state of project funding, the design process, and what that looks like going forward over the next year or so, year and a half. And also, as part of that, we'll be letting the community know that the toll revenue that has already been committed to the new bridge and continues to be raised will continue to be preserved for that purpose, because that is such a kind of a sticking point for people. And then in terms of longer term communications, we'll be transitioning to developing messaging that's more evergreen, that we can rely on as things change. So bottom line, we're being proactive right now. And, in times of uncertainty, it's really best practice to offer more information and not less, even if it means really being honest about what we don't know. And so that's a good way to build trust with the public.
I could just comment that I've got, I was at church yesterday, and one of the members came up to me and said, "Hey, I saw a video on the bridge on Facebook." And she said, what do you think about that? And I had to lie through my teeth because I didn't even know we were putting anything on Facebook. So I got home And I happened to look at LinkedIn and there's a number of videos about our bridge on LinkedIn that just kind of showed up. And I don't know if the rest of you knew, if the communication group knew this was landing, but I would just encourage us, if we're going to land something like that, give a heads up to all of us so we know before we go someplace and get hit with it cold.
I just think it's really a bad idea to lie in church.
I know.
Thank you, Commissioner Fox. So that video that was posted last week, that's something that had been in the works for many months, and that had sometimes there is a delay in terms of us sharing what we're working on and when it hits social media. But are you just saying every time we post on social media, you would like us to notify you?
Yeah, I think it's appropriate that you let the authority know that, hey, this is going to hit, and the communication group has already seen the video and approved it. They like the content. And if I know that, then, and I know it's going to drop, I'm kind of expecting it. What I don't like is surprises, especially when you're out there in the community and they expect you to know where in fact you have no clue. That's my opinion. I don't know about the rest of you.
I mean, social media, there's a lot of social media. I don't think you really mean that you want to know about any post on social media. You're talking about a major.
If we from the authority or from the group is publishing something then I think we need to know that it's about to hit. If it's just communication, somebody complaining about this and this, no. But if it's something official from us going out, I think it behooves us to know before it gets dropped.
Kathy?
Just two things I think this would help. That when the communication plan is approved, we know when we could see it. And then that communication plan should say how many posts are happening, by who, by when, around these dates, plus or minus 5, whatever, like around Thanksgiving, we're going to say happy Thanksgiving. Obviously we're not going to do that, but whatever that looks like. So it gives us as commissioners a read ahead, but also sort of sets people up to know what the communication plan is, because I am not as new as I was when I joined, but I am still newer. And so I want to ensure that I'm saying the right things at the right times. And so if that also could incorporate maybe what a commissioner should do on social media, if something's posted, maybe like some guidance as well in the communication plan, just so that we are on the same page. Because I do think that would be very helpful. For the other commissioners, you could just say you're not active on social media and you missed it. And thank you for bringing it to the attention. That's what I do, because it's true. So you're not lying in church, but it also doesn't make us look like we're not talking to each other. The other thing I'd like to just know is we did get a committee or a comment from the public, which is why I think these name tags are out, because there was communication issues. One of the things was we have 2 websites. That's the project website and the authority website. Why do we have 2 websites? And what is the plan to merge them? Or if I'm confused as to why, it would be I'm sure other people are.
The reason for 2 is this is not abnormal. One is the authority page that will live on after the project, right? It is just, here's the authority, about the authority, what the authority is, it'll always live. The project website is just a single project and is where everybody goes to get information related to the project. Now, your all's uniqueness is you have one project. So it's really a sub-page to the main authority page where it says project, and then you can go to the project website. So either way, it would be a separate page.
To ensure, because again, if we're asking for feedback from the public and we get it, and then we're taking it, it would behoove us to identify the fact that we actually are listening to the public when they give us comments. And this is a simple thing. I think that there should be a why we have 2 website video then, because if we, again, where do people go for information? we're getting comments back that are like, why do we have two websites? Why are you guys not using names? Like that kind of thing. I would like, as an authority, for us to either put something out as to why we have two websites, or make it clearer, because it is confusing.
I think the second part, it's like, if it's not clear from going to the website, then let's just make the website clear, because not everybody's gonna watch the video, right?
Okay.
Especially if you put it on the wrong website.
Or the other issue, guys, is we're a one project. And this is the only thing we're going to be doing for the next 5-6 years. So maybe we have split it into two down the road after this project's done. But between now and when we open the bridge, we're really talking about one thing, aren't we? If it's confusing the public.
Yeah, I mean, maybe there's a different way. I don't know if there's a different way to link to it on the main authority page.
Why don't we just ask them to work on it?
hoodriverbridge.org.
Yes.
Type that in, go
Yes.
to HRWSBA, and it's the project.
Yeah.
I suggest we let the experts,
Yeah.
we give it our input, and let them work on
I
it.
mean, basically, you guys want everybody to go to the main bridge authority page.
We want them to
when
go
they
to
go
where
to-
the information is.
Because we have lots of websites, right? They all point to one place. So we just need hoodriverbridge.org to send them to the authority page, where they can then link to the project and go back to that page.
I'm not telling you how to do the nomenclature.
We'll fix
I'm just-
it.
Yeah, I'm saying we don't need to.
Yes, we can.
It's silly to have two.
I don't have a hand up.
Sorry, Ann.
Yeah, hi. I understand. Yeah, if there's confusion about having two web pages, we can totally make that, like explain that on the websites themselves. I would recommend against redirecting the project page to the Bridge Authority page at this point, because I think the general public is, and maybe I'm wrong on this, but it's my sense that the general public is more interested in the project than the, and maybe the FAQs and things like that than the Bridge Authority. The Bridge Authority page, the website at this point is pretty bare bones, other than meeting information. So if I understood that right, is you were asking about like redirecting hoodriverbridge.org to the Bridge Authority site, correct?
Yeah. We could take it offline, Anna, and have a conversation about it.
Totally.
There's reasons I would prefer to keep the authority page. It is the .gov page, so.
I don't want to take it off. I don't think anyone was suggesting that.
I saw a hand up over here.
Anna made a comment about tolling, saying that that's kind of the issue that people want to know about, and that she's assuring them that there's no change to the tolling picture. And I don't know that I can say that. We have not finished the traffic and revenue study, and given the current economic picture that we've got, it's not inconceivable to me that we may discover that we have to have more tolls, that we have to pay more. I don't know. We don't know that at all. Exactly. So no change. But we can't say that there's no change, can we?
Can't say there is a change.
Today. That's the
Well, it's
best
going up.
information we have.
When the bridge is open,
I think
according to the current toll.
where are you getting into?
I think she's talking about is that the money that's set aside for the new bridge is gonna continue to be set aside.
And under the current, no, I think it's under the current estimate with the project, the way we were pursuing to get funding for that cost does not include increasing the tolls at this time. That's what I think she was trying to say, was our finance plan right now to fund the 1.12 does not include a toll increase over the plan that has been established. That's what she was trying to say. Now, if we don't get federal money and we don't get the BIP grant, or we don't get the state funding, then yes, that would have to be revisited. But the current plan to get the 1.12 does not include raising tolls.
I'm sure not making any promises. And I think it's.
You can't say that we won't.
Right.
It's just that, and there's a difference in saying it that way, in that the current plan does not include it. It doesn't mean that we're not ever going to do it if the plan doesn't pay it. Like, if we don't get the money from other sources, then you may have to come back to that.
So So correct me, because I believe that there's been multiple discussions that every 5 years is a 15% increase.
That's part of the current plan.
So you're saying on top of the current plan, which does have a total increase of 50 cents once the new bridge is open, and then 15% every 5 years, just so everyone remembers what we're talking about.
That's cool.
You're saying on top of that, it's not an increase. So at this current moment, which is like, James, it's like what, 11% design right now? Like, so there's so much unknown.
Correct.
So I think the question, will the tolls increase? I mean, like, will the day come tomorrow? Maybe, but we don't know. Like it's a hard question. So I don't think the authority, Facebook or social media should take any stance until we're absolutely sure, because those are the screenshots people use and say, you told me the toll isn't going to be increased in February of 2019, 20 years later. It's like, well, hang on. Stuff has changed.
We also don't have control over the current toll on the current bridge.
Right.
They might have to increase it before then in the first place.
Yeah, but I think Anna's point though was that more communication builds trust. And so what we can do is we can talk about the situation that we're in today, and then we see these cost increases, and our plan to try and address those cost increases is to go to the feds through the BIP and request the gap, 100% through that BIP, without raising the asks for the state or the federal. That doesn't change, or state or the local, which is the tolling, right? So, while that's, likely going to change, as things progress for, you name the, you guess the reason, right? It's like, that is what we are currently planning on today. And, if we wait until we know, we're not going to put any information out for 3 years.
Sorry.
No, I mean, maybe I'm exaggerating on the timeline, right? But it's like, when are we going to know?
But the plan that we approved has a toll increase once the new bridge is open by 50 cents, and then every 5 years at 15%. So to say in this moment, no toll increase is against what we know.
We're saying there's no increase to the current plan. Now, the current plan
it's a semblance of
shows there is an increase every 5 years, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
So maybe what we need to do, if we need to do it, is put out the plan again so everybody understands what the plan is, which has actually changed a little bit, to your point. If you remember, originally the toll study said we needed $70 million of local plus X to get to 520 million. When we changed it to 1.120, what we did is we put a BIP application in for 532, and we raised the TIFIA from 70 to the max 105.
Right.
Yeah.
But that change right there doesn't change the funding or the tolling plan that we originally had.
Right.
Yeah, and the reason for that is essentially, even at that 520, we had anticipated additional money that we were going, like we raised basically, like we needed that extra money in our tolling plan. And so
forward thinking.
Yeah. So even though you're right, you're absolutely right. It's like both of those are true, right? We increased the amount that we're planning to come from local, but only to what we had originally included in the plan, in our financing plan.
But if we're going to tell people what the plan is, then we need to tell them what the plan is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We've been doing that.
What the change in the plan is, right? Because everybody knows that the project price increased, right? But is the problem that they don't know how the plan has changed accordingly? Is that where we feel like it's a gap?
I think what Anna was talking about is that she's telling people, yes, the project price has changed, but the tolling plan has not changed.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And I think that is technically correct, but I do worry that sets the expectation that we're never going to touch that, and I didn't know that.
It could be misunderstood.
But I think if we're going to say the story, we need to also list out the key assumptions into this plan.
Would you mind muting Scott? Anna, your hands up.
Well,
Yeah.
a little bit of this stuff is a long way.
Just a point of clarification. What I mentioned is that we had planned to let the community know that the toll revenue that's being raised right now from the current bridge is going to continue to be held for the future bridge. So and any of this messaging, so you guys know, it's not like we would just put it out there without like checking with Carrie and Mike and making sure it's accurate. And so, yeah, I was more talking about that like 4 million or whatever that's in a pot will continue to be held for the purpose of to be put towards the future bridge. But I think, the conversation that's going on about the tolling plan once the new bridge is open, I'm also going to start working on a tolling page for the Bridge Authority website that details all of that and answers a lot of questions. So lots to come.
Are you saying the Bridge Authority website or the project website?
Bridge Authority website. I think this is what we agreed on, Mike, because tolling is specifically a function of the Bridge Authority. So this page would go on the Bridge Authority site and we could cross-link it to the project site.
Okay.
Yeah, I just want to respond to what Commissioner Fox said. I completely agree. We had a meeting last week, and I wasn't aware that a video was being released. So news to me. I also think that I also like the idea of maybe the commission being able to review the publications before they go out. I don't think we have a set requirement that happens. So maybe that's something that we need to look at changing and adding to our process. So yeah, thank you for pointing that out, bring that up.
Anna.
Yeah, just to address that, these videos that post that went out last week, that was a clip of a video that was produced by StoryGorge a few months ago. That was part of our communications plan that was approved. Marla had approved these. She saw these videos and approved them months ago. And so these are not, just to make it clear that these are not videos that we're just like creating, going rogue and making these videos or anything. These are things that had already been approved and that we're starting to push out there. So just to make sure you guys.
Is there anywhere that the commissioners could see those videos before they go live?
They're all live on YouTube, our YouTube channel now. And so there are two, I'd be happy to send links out. And so they're on YouTube.
And what we're all saying lightly is we want to see them before you drop them, so we're knowledgeable of what's hitting the street, so we're ready to talk about it if we need to talk about it. We're actually being supportive.
Yeah, I appreciate
what we're
that.
asking for is give us a heads up before it happens, that we don't get surprised.
And there's another part to that, and that is that you have pillars of the community that are on this board that they can share those videos and expand the reach of you guys just posting it. And that's one piece of it. And so before you put one of those videos up, if you could send that out with the link so that we could also share it as well as review it, that would go a long way to getting that public information out further into the community.
Yeah, happy to do that. I wonder from a social media perspective, in terms of sharing, it might be more helpful to share and not saying that, happy to share these videos beforehand as well, but from a sharing perspective, it might be really helpful for us and our reach if we could share those social media posts after they're already up as well. So you can just share those as well. So not instead of, but in addition.
Right. That's the way I meant it to be understood, is we would reshare, but we have to know that it's there in order to reshare.
Got it. Okay. Will do. Thanks.
Okay. Yes.
And when you're working on your financial, my voice is garbage. When you work on your next set of communications material, especially on the finance side, feel free to tag me or give me a call or something when you're going through that stuff. Thanks.
For sure. Thank you.
Okay, we're running quite a bit behind schedule, so we're gonna move into new business. Yeah, I know. Action items. Number one, the procurement of third-party consultant for the indirect cost calculation.
All right, so the motion is in the packet. I'm gonna give a brief overview to he and Debbie. If you have anything to add, please do. And the motion is pretty straightforward. We need to develop a indirect cost rate for the authority. In order to do that, you need a qualified firm. This is to bring on that qualified firm.
The reason we need that SCL is to get the reimbursement from the grantors for our expenses to do the business project.
Why, the question I've got, why can't I do this with an HNTB?
Because we don't have the certifications to do with it.
It has to be done by certified.
You guys don't have CPA.
Yeah.
We don't have
HNTB.
We have
20 million.
we have CPAs. We do not have ones that are qualified to do this.
And
This is a specialty service that we do not have people qualified.
as well, Debbie's a CPA and she didn't feel comfortable doing it.
This shouldn't be a very large scope of work.
It's less than $10,000.
And in order to get it going, we decided to go with a task order contract type, so that by get the proposals from qualified firm, we have certain work as well as the other work according to their occasion. And just quickly use that form for the other work you may need future. And we have the master agreement developed for other task orders. It will be quick and easy procurement because it's only $10,000 to begin with. And timing wise, once it's developed, approved here, we'll start looking at the schedule and more likely in the when we start phase 1B contract, because as of now, we don't have that scope of work.
So when you're doing this, make sure that you not only have a cost model for your indirect costs, but you also have a narrative that very clearly describes charging practice into each of these elements.
Yeah. We'll have that because if it's the WASDOT or ODOT or FHWA want to see how we came up with that.
They will want to see it. Yeah, okay.
Sir, is this gonna be an RFP process through a website or how we do, or is it a task order? Did you have to get qualified firms or just doing art how you doing it? So
this is a size wise, this falls into the intermediate.
Yeah.
So we'll get a quote from 3 qualified firms, but we're not gonna just go with their proposed amount. We'll have a evaluation criteria that will be probably reviewed by finance and funding committee members. So that we are evaluating the firm who's most qualified in mix of their proposed fee as well.
it's just so we don't have to do RFP review.
There you go.
Asking who's gonna do it.
Debbie, I see you. Is there something you want to add?
No, I was just here in case there were questions that I could answer,
Okay.
but I think everybody covered it very well.
Any further questions? If not, I would entertain a motion to proceed with the procurement of a task order contracting for consulting services.
I would make that motion.
I'll second.
There is a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Thank you, Eric. We'll move on, the meeting schedule, 2025.
So at the October 28th meeting, staff was directed to reach out to all the board members, ask them if there were other opportunities to have our meeting time, day time, and we did a survey of that. The survey results are attached to the motion. We talked about this with the governance committee and decided to maintain the schedule that we currently have and frequency that we currently have based on those responses. So this motion is basically to just approve continuing from a 2 to 4 on the second and fourth days, which is our current schedule.
Yeah, can I say a couple more words on that? So So there are two pieces. First of all, we didn't have great response. There were a fair number of people who didn't respond. Amy bravely offered to track everyone down. But what you can see from what you already got was that in this format, we weren't going to be able to come up with a time when people would agree to be there. It may be that if we were sitting in a room and having that discussion together, that we might be able to get a little more flexibility and come up with an acceptable time. But doing it this way did not work successfully. And given that there's also an ongoing discussion about when we might switch to a one meeting per month instead of 2 meetings per month, what phase of the project will do that. It seems to make more sense to delay that until that time. In terms of the public's ability to attend the meetings, all meetings are available online. The issues that we're discussing are probably not as interesting to the public as issues that will be coming a little bit later. So right now, it just seems that delaying that discussion and having it in this meeting instead of in our committee meeting makes more sense. So I'm not going to say when we're going to delay it to, but we're punting, and it's just saying that this discussion in our committee did not result in anything successful.
We need a motion to approve the new schedule for 2025.
Which is exactly the same as it is now.
Correct.
Second and fourth Mondays.
I so moved.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Okay. We've got item number 3, 1A contract extension with Kiewit to June 30th, 2025.
So this is a request for time extension. The not to exceed amount will remain the same. There are some remaining funds within Kiewit Phase 1A. We need to get through some additional discussion related to the opinion of probable cost and the baseline schedule, the risk workshop, and other items, as well as cash flow for the authority before we move into Phase 1B. This extension allows us to do some of that. I will not say all of that, but it allows us to get that work started. And based on some decisions that come out of the risk workshop and the discussions around that, then we will have to determine if additional budget is needed. But right now, their current contract expires June 30th, and we need them to continue.
And the current contract expires
June 30th. I keep saying June, sorry, December, the end of December.
January 8th.
That was December 30th.
No.
I'm sorry, January, just read the motion. It says January 8th. It ends January 8th. Sorry, this extends it to June 30th to allow more time under their current budget so that we don't expire prior to being able to work through January.
By extending it to June 30th.
It's contagious.
Yeah. By extending it, is that enough time? Do we want to extend it further so we don't have to take another vote?
No, because if we're going to have to make other decisions if we do not have additional funding prior to this date. So this gives us enough time to do that. We may have to come back for a budget adjustment. We will, depending on what decisions we make in January. But right now the time is all we need, and this is plenty of time to get us through.
Is there a motion?
I move that we go ahead and honor the no cost contract extension to Kiewit until we have more information to make a different decision.
June 30th. No later than June 30th.
Yeah. Okay, is there a second?
I will second that.
There is a motion and a second to extend the contract to June 30th, 2025 for Kiewit. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Motion carries. Next up, we have our authorizing signers and adopting of a credit card policy, resolution 2024-13.
Debbie, I'll let you clarify this one.
Okay, hopefully this is just housekeeping. Umpqua Bank is moving forward with getting you guys a credit card, but they do need a resolution that authorizes who the signers are on that card. And then best practices is to have a credit card policy. And so I was just going to do all of it in one resolution so that you have authorized signers and you have a credit card policy. Just to make it clear, and at this point, we're only planning on getting one credit card. It will sit there in your White Salmon office there and be used primarily for travel costs. And I believe there's a few ongoing software charges that may be going on to that. The invoices will come to you for approval, or the bills will still come to you for approval. So you'll see them every month. And I don't think that there's anything unusual about this. So and you're adopting it by resolution, so you can always modify it by resolution as well. So, yes.
Debbie, do they have to authorize any kind of limit?
No, I took a look at what we were thinking it was going to be, and then the bank wanted to double it from the standpoint that so say that you're charging from November 1st to November 30th, but then you don't pay the bill until sometime in December. So you're also going to have December charges on it as well. So we're looking at probably a $10,000 limit on it.
Now, is that a 10,000 limit on the card, or is that to each transaction card on the total?
It would be on the card, and no one individual transaction could go over that either.
Okay, so the concern that I would have, as an example, a couple of months ago, when a few of us went back to DC, that combined travel, I'm sure exceeded $10,000.
No, it did not. No, it was only about 1,800 a person,
Including hotel.
Yeah, it was everything. Yeah, it was not more than 10 for the
Okay,
authority members.
all right, that's fine then.
The only
And
thing
we'll be
that,
able to manage this card online, so I can go in and temporarily bump it up if we do need to do that. If something comes up where I need to temporarily bump it up, I will be able to do that.
sorry, one other thing related to this, I would say we should look at it and come back to you with reoccurring charges that we would like to move to it. I think
Yeah.
some of them are on my card right now that I'd like to move over to.
What's wrong with that?
And, hey,
Other than
still my part, but but yeah, so we'll come back to you with what those are. I don't think any of those will affect it, but it might.
I would entertain a motion to approve resolution 2024-13.
So moved.
Second.
So moved. Second.
There is a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Motion carries. Informational items.
All right, informational items. I'm gonna go through these somewhat quickly, but stop me if there's questions on any of them. We do have a presentation, or we were going to have a presentation, I think based on time. I'm gonna recommend we move that to the December 9th meeting.
Okay.
Just because I think these discussions are gonna be more important than that. We want to do a risk introduction meeting with the authority, just more of a informational, but it would be fine to postpone that. So the use of reserve funds, the first thing on here, what that is that based on our cash flow and where we're getting on our cash flow as we transition out of being able to use the ARPA funds and some of the grants that were under the port and you had immediate cash access to, that you are approaching a period of time until we get infra and other state funds where you may need cash on hand. And the reserve of funding that you have from the toll increase, sitting in your reserve account could be a no interest option to you. That I think it's more of a recommendation to start thinking about that and start potentially having discussions with the port about that, what that would look like. So we just wanted to bring it to everyone's attention that you're heading into a period where it's probably time to have that conversation and look at that as a potential cash flow opportunity that would be reimbursed immediately with grant funds, so that it would never actually impact the balance, other than it would be a free interest loan to yourself that would be paid back as soon as you were reimbursed from the grants.
And we can't just use your credit card.
Preferably not. It doesn't have enough limit for you to do that. We would get really slow. So, yeah. But wanted to just bring that up, that it's probably time to start having that conversation. Any questions related to that one?
What would be the worst case scenario down that road?
I don't know if there is one, because we would only spend it on grant reimbursable expenses. We know what those are. I mean, if we didn't know what those are, I would say that you should spend something that's not grant reimbursable, but we're now pretty versed in what's grant reimbursable and what's not. So I don't think there really is, because, I mean, you got the grants, you know, you have access. We'd only be billing against grants we knew we could get reimbursement from. There may be a delay in 60 days or something, depending on how the rate grant reimbursement comes back. I guess there's one negative. One loss is that you would not be earning interest on the money that you would have in there. So let's say it's interest free. It's kind of not really interest free, because you're losing the 5 1/4 of whatever the percentage is right now. So you would be losing that, but you wouldn't be paying that on to something else.
We also would need to, at some point in the future, have that reserve account reestablished back to the full amount. So it's sort of like like we're kind of borrowing from the piggy bank, but the money all really has to go back before TIFIA is going to sign on our loan. And so they're going to need to see that money in the bank for collateral. And as soon as we start using it as working capital, that money's going to actually have to come from somewhere else to replace that working capital.
So I would suggest that if you want to start doing this, as you talk about it, you think about the terms that you would put on yourself, to how you would reimbursement, timing of when you would need it reimbursed. It really should be a short-term thing, like 6 months. But it's, just something I think you should start to think about and consider.
I'll tell you from my personal point of view, I wouldn't touch this unless we had access to that $75 million. If we get approval for the 75 and we need to use some of this for that balance of funds or paying before we invoice the government, I'm much more okay with that. If we're using this in lieu of an outside loan to cover funding that we really don't have yet, I would be against it. Likewise, going for a loan from the outside when we don't even know whether we're going to get the 75 million, I wouldn't do that either. I'd go very conservative until we see we got approval on the 75, and now we've got a real funding source coming into the project.
I don't see that it's very conservative. I mean, I don't think there's any world in which any of us should agree to expending any of this if we don't know that it's going to be reimbursable.
So I'd just be careful starting this up until we all agree that the funding is rolling and we're using this truly temporarily.
Well, one other thing I think we all need to think about is there are things that are not reimbursable by grants that we spend money on that we've currently been taking loans in order to pay for, and that's from the port.
Yep.
And we have an agreement that only goes to 500,000. And in the first year, we spent how much?
Where are we at?
Over
I don't know what that
250,
means.
right?
How much our current non-reimbursable amount?
I don't have the exact number, but it's.
Debbie, do you know?
So that's something that we have to be cognizant of, is that we might have one more year, but what if we needed 2 years?
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
we have to have that as an option and availability, that we may need to use some of that money for short term until we can get maybe another loan
I
from.
might say we'll cross that bridge when we come to it.
Oh. And some of that unreimbursable right now is because we don't have an overhead rate. when we get an overhead rate, that would go down, whatever that would establish, so that will get better.
Yeah, I think your overhead rate is going to help you, and then I can go through and figure out what your monthly non-reimbursable is, and so you can see how many months of loan you still have available from the port. I can get back to you on that. I don't have it in front of me, but I can do that pretty quickly.
I think
those government affairs contracts started July 1, so I think you guys are fine.
Yeah,
the port covered your non-reimbursable expenses through June 30th.
Correct, for this year. Yeah, it's more going forward that,
Right.
500,000 is not gonna last you forever.
Right.
And you will.
What types of things are not reimbursable? Like
Lobbyists, mostly.
lobbyists?
That's the big.
I mean, there's other ones right now. Lobbyist and non-project related expenses. So we are still defining how much time you spend in here having the authority. This is gonna get us down a rabbit hole, but
No, it's okay. Then maybe period.
it's non-project expenses that are for the running of the agency.
We've got 10 more to get through.
I know, we're not
Get
gonna
back
make
on
it.
track. Modification.
Modifications to the bond. This is just more, again, informational. We will find out more about this in January. There is an understanding right now that the biological opinion has a lot of constraints. And we would like to pursue with NIMS and NOAA some modifications. There will be details that will be brought to you early next year about what those are, and the authority will need to make some decisions related to that. We just wanted everybody to be aware that that's coming up, and that's a potential that there's some highly driven cost and schedule impacts of the current bio that we think will be beneficial to the authority to investigate. So just want to make you aware of that. Project cash flow, we met with all the committees on that. Unless there's a question on that, I'm going to skip spending half hour going through that. All right. The OPC development schedule, we did the same thing with the committees. I think everybody is aware of that. Any questions that you thought of since you've heard about that on the schedule for it? Okay. Risk updates, we talked about that. We're going to do it actually on the 16th. I think this says the 13th. It's going to be the 16th. We'll do a risk workshop. That will be we are planning right now for that to be a public workshop. So we'll go through that in January. We are working through the phase 1B schedule for our amendments. So right now, I think all the committees have H&TB's phase 1B scope and fee. You'll see in there that we've adjusted the start of our designers to line up with what we are estimating right now to be the start of Kiewit's design. Depending on how all that shakes out and when they actually start, we'll need to adjust that chunk of time. We think the design time is about 18 months. If you have comments on that, please send them back to us as soon as you can. We will be rolling out a second version of that and having a second round of meetings with all the committees next week, third and fourth. And we are meeting internally with some of our subs and others based on some comments we've already received. So we are actively modifying it as we hear things from folks. So please send your comments as you get them. And then our phase 1A amendment budget is through December 31st of this year. So we are looking to do a phase 1B 2-year extension of our budget. Again, it will just establish a not to exceed amount that we would have access to for those 2 years. The scope is kind of in there, but that scope may move a little bit depending on when we get notice to proceed or Kiewit gets notice to proceed for design and the other activities that we're proposing to do. So just take a look at it, send us your comments. If we need to do one-on-one meetings with you or you've got questions, reach out to us. We're happy to sit down with you and go through that. So, or if you have trouble with the Excel file, let us know as well.
On top of that, the Charlie sent the other file for the PDB contract amendment for phase 1B. You're shooting for April of next year. Phase 1B, all depending on the risk workshop and the value engineering that we're supposed to determining and deciding what they need to do in the phase 1B, but it's still worked on in this time. So it's a more like informational only, but I just showing it's being worked on.
So just one comment for everybody on reviewing the 1B estimate for HNTB. Everybody knows where we are on funding. We're going to be tight on funding for a bit. I would encourage everybody to take a look at the scope document and then the cost spreads. And if you had to make a cut here, where would you cut first, second, and third? And I think the overall number was 17 million. What would you do if you wanted to get it to 15 and maybe, I don't know, something less than that, 13? What scope would you cut out or defer? What would you eliminate totally if you could? So it's something that we've got to go through. Don't just give it back to them. You know, please spend some time on it. It's really important.
Which list is this? I'm sorry, I missed that.
There's a 1B estimate that HNTB is given to each of the chairs of the subcommittees. The chairs were supposed to give it to each of the committee members.
Yeah, you're talking about the Excel sheet.
Excel sheet and then a workbook of scope.
Yeah, the
Word document.
that one. I have it put out on my desk.
And theoretically, you can make the tie between the Excel spreadsheet. Not theoretically, you can. But I would encourage you to spend some time and go through it and looking at it critically. And what I did, just so you maybe want to do it, when you look at your Excel spreadsheet, there's two key deliverables, 60% and 100% design. So if you draw a vertical line at 60%, you can take a look at your expenditures by task before the 60 and after the 60. Do the same thing with 100% and what you've got after that. Are we sequenced properly? And do you see that we're really, everything they do adds value? Are we willing to pay for that value when you compare everything else that we've got to do?
How do you want that feedback?
Send it to us directly through comments. You can do it in the PDF. You can send it in the, I don't care how you do it. Just send them directly back to us and we'll bring those comments back to the committees. If your chair wants you to do it through them, that's fine too.
Yeah.
Or do you guys have just, I don't know, if you guys have decided to do it a certain way, do it the way you've decided to do it, but we don't care how you give it back to us.
Thanks.
We more importantly want to make sure we get them correctly.
I'll get through all that stuff.
Sure. The ODOT agency service agreement, we are working on that. We do need to get that resolved and edited. We really need to get some of the other items resolved with FHWA and ODOT in order to know, like the right of way, for example. I can't really finalize this until I know their right of way and what their participation is. So it'll come to you as soon as we can get it ready and submit it to you.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Good. So just, I did read it, but so we are paying for services that they're offering because they're not the lead agency. They're consulting or they're, I don't want to go down a rabbit hole, but I just want to make sure I'm reading this clearly, that all the ODOT people now are getting paid by us, the authority, not me.
Same thing we're doing with WashDOT. If
Okay.
we ask them to perform something for us, then we will reimburse them for their time specific, because this is not an ODOT or a WashDOT project. So they'll give us a scope and fee, and they'll give us, just like anybody else does, it's kind of like another consulting firm to you all. So if we ask ODOT to do something like lead the right of way, they will charge us for that service.
But we have to use them because
For the Port of Hood River, tasks, yes, because of the conflict of interest.
We didn't have a better answer.
Correct. Okay.
Okay. All right, the October financial report, Debbie, on the tolling. What's the
I
number?
don't have anything to add unless there's any questions. It's the same format as you guys always get, and it's kind of the same message that we're a little bit behind, but not terribly behind. And we'll have a better handle when the TNR study is virtually complete in February, March timeframe. So that's where we're at. We right now have about $4.5 million sitting in the LGIP.
And what is the current rate on LGIP?
I think it has dropped. It was 5.1 through the end of October, but I think it's dropped to 4.7%.
Thanks.
Columbia River Gorge Commission meeting, we've been invited to come to present at that on the 10th. I will be in training, so if someone else is available to go do
Where is
that.
it?
I'll get you the location. I can't think of it right now.
So this conflicts with the PD.
It conflicts with the FHWA training and the ledge days. So if you're not doing the training, you're not doing the ledge days, if you're available to do, it's just a project update meeting to the commission board. We'll put the presentation together, prep with whoever can go do it, but we just need a volunteer to, if you can, go do it, and I can get you the details if
Right
you think you'll be
now,
available.
who's going to the training? Who's signed up for?
Right now it is Jake and Ben, I think, are the only two on the training.
And for legislation days?
Grant and you.
Okay. Which means we need somebody other than that for
Gorge Commission. Yeah, and it's their standard time on Tuesdays. I don't remember their standing time. Sorry, I think it's. Is it? Okay.
Maybe one that I don't know where that fits in.
And we don't have the exact, we don't know where on the agenda yet where we'll be. This is their normal standard meeting time.
I missed that. Is it legislative days? Do we have a roster for that already?
We have two people that are able to go.
Who's going? Or
Grant
who's available?
is available and Mike is
two of you.
available. Yes,
Okay.
they're available to go.
Okay.
We don't have dates or times or schedules or when we're meeting or who, anything like that, but
Yeah.
Mike and Grant are available those days to go.
Gorge Commission's 8:30 on Tuesday, it looks like.
Okay.
But you don't know where
You can.
after 8:30.
Okay. Thanks. We'll get with you then on the time and get the presentation put together for you and
Looks like
everything.
it's virtual. It says White Salmon via Zoom. Gorge Commission.
Yeah, and we'll check with that. Some are Zoom, some are hybrid, some are in person, so we'll make sure you're prepped, Jake. Thanks for helping.
Sure.
MOA with the Umatilla tribe. This is for informational right now, and discussion, and we should take a few minutes, sorry, to discuss this. You may want to take an action on this.
I think we've got to take an action on it.
I do. I wanted you to present, talk to them about.
Okay, so where we are with the Umatilla and the MOA. 6 months, 7 months, 8 months ago, we reached a tentative agreement with them on an MOA. Since then, it went kind of into paralysis because of changing to steel and concrete and all of that kind of stuff. Well, we're back on it now. The tentative agreement basically said that we would pay up to $500,000 for tribal rights during the bridge construction. They recognize the 500-yard no fishing zone. We've committed that we will set up some type of a system that communicates if we can open up sections to fish. And if we haven't worked that out yet, it will likely be through cryptic, who then will notify the tribes. What we're thinking of is putting numbers on the piers on the Hood River Bridge and say between piers 2 and 3, you can fish next Thursday through Sunday, something like that. So that's basically what's in that agreement. There is an agreement that we would, if I remember right, we would start payment when we give the contractor notice to proceed on construction. And I can't remember if we were making 2 or 3 payments.
3 payments.
3 payments over the life of construction. And that's it. There's nothing there talking about TFAS or getting access there or building a causeway. It's just purely that piece of it. The team at Umatilla has agreed with that. They're getting ready to take it up through their food chain. We want to be ready at the next meeting to say, we got a deal. And we would like to get approval from you guys that if I'm the senior member there, I can sign for you and cut the agreement, and we get the first one in the box. And we go after the next 3. That's what it is.
Can I just add one thing to
Sure.
this?
Absolutely.
It's been a lot of work getting to this point, and there's been a lot of meetings that we've both been on, one of us been on, one of, Mike's been on. And what we're not doing is going back and saying, well, that went at 455. We got it from the tribe and we are honoring their request and we are asking for that to be finalized. We're not doing it back and forth, kind of like, how much money can we save? I just want to make sure that's been
Well,
related.
we actually did a little bit of that.
Well,
Before you were there, but we very quickly figured out, okay, this is within our budget. This is reasonable. We've spent 4 years talking with these guys about every 2 weeks. Enough's enough. And we're close enough, call it good.
So you believe that there's a reasonable basis for this number?
No.
okay, so hang on.
We need to
There's a
revise.
reasonable
No,
basis for
Mike
this
should
number.
say that is
Yeah,
his
that's-
personal opinion.
That's not.
My personal opinion, no. However, is it reasonable for the environment? Yes.
I would say, sir, this is why, that's great. I would say that this is a beacon of light on a situation and that we are doing the best that we can to ensure that everyone is left whole. You cannot put a price on fish. You cannot put a price on rights being refused, but we are doing our very best. I think we've been overly communicative with all the tribes that we've been involved in. And this would have been done 3 months ago had we not had to take a break because of the change to steel. And so the iron is hot. Everyone is ready to get this over with. I think that their staff is ready to get it signed because it's been meetings where we've had no updates for months and that's getting very frustrating. But I don't feel as though anyone's feeling that they're not getting the best deal possible. I feel that we are putting a really good foot forward to getting this to a project that it's going to be everybody coming together as opposed to people being angry. So I can say that.
That's great.
I personally think this is the best deal you're going to get.
Great, yeah, and I get this. If you could help me, my recollection is that one of the issues right up front was that they find the concept of putting a price on their rights to be offensive. So what is the proper language to use? So what are we paying for?
We are mitigating. We're not paying for it. We're mitigating the fact that they're not able to express their cultural rights to the tie to the natural resource that they are one with. And so we are not putting a price on fish. We are instead hoping to offer compensation and mitigation for the access that they're now being refused.
Great, thank you. That's helpful.
Yeah, what she said.
It's important. People care.
Oh, it is. I agree.
Yeah. That's the one thing I'm like very about. But I am very hopeful that this agreement, once it's signed, there is been other agreements that Mike and I received at the last meeting with the Nez Perce. So I think that this will open the door to hopefully more positive relationships with the multiple tribes that we are impeding with this construction of the bridge.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Glad to hear that we could come to an agreement.
Yeah.
So
Let's.
Would someone like to, I would entertain a motion to authorize Commissioner Fox to sign for the commission on the agreement with Umatilla Nation.
I would move that.
Second. There's a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Motion
Aye.
carries.
Nice work getting to this point.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, and the last thing is just if you have not responded for whatever reason through email, if you could tell Amy before you leave, if you would like to do the trainings or if you would like to be involved in the ledge days, just let her know. This will probably be the last time we ask.
So I'm gonna put in one little, please. You know, Federal Highways is putting this on. It's kind of important, if at all possible, that we load the room up with commissioners or alternates, because we're going to be interfacing with them for a number of years coming forward. And it's important to wave the flag with these folks. Plus the fact you may learn something.
Attend if you.
Which we can use.
Yeah, and we do, I think we have 15 people, Amy. You have the last number, somewhere in that neighborhood. We are gonna go back and ask FHWA now that we kind of know and we've had this meeting. We may reach out to some of the other places you all sit on the cities and counties and see if you may have one or two people that want to attend, because we do have some capacity. But we'll follow up this week with an email on that, or early next week, to those cities or counties or whatever. So if somebody asks, you can explain it, what it is.
Okay. All right, and we are over schedule. So we are going to push the presentation Risk 101 off. Announcements, our next meeting will be Monday, December 9th, 2024 from 2 to 4 here and online. Is there anything left around the table? Bad. If there's nothing else, I will adjourn this meeting. Thank you all for coming. Thank you for everyone online. Have a great day and a very happy Thanksgiving.
We do.